Keith Cray is the director of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and graduated from Michigan Tech in 1974 with a degree in forestry. He has served the state of Michigan extensively during his career, including the DNR and as the past director of the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. In these positions, he has tackled a wide range of administrative and legislative policies, land use issues, the Farm Bill Conservation Program, which really set him up to really tackle one of the biggest issues that he ever faced in his life. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to introduce to you Keith Cray. Welcome home, Keith.
Well, good morning. I'll start by saying, Christina, you got a job, right? And so we'll talk about water quality in just a few minutes. So, to my good friend, President Moras, to the chairman, Trustee Wykowski, trustees Jackwarts, Alila, and Ryan, parents, honored guests, graduates, and parents. I'm really humbled and honored to be here today. It certainly has been a long journey, but I want to just share a few things with you, and I'll kind of be brief, be bright, and be seated, right? Because you're on your journey and your destination. But when I was at Tech, I really learned the importance of practical application of science and technology. Science that can make a real difference in the lives of real people. Long before it was trendy in other universities, I learned at Tech a multidisciplinary approach in the power of group problem solving. I continue to hold a deep respect for the work that is done here, for the faculty, staff, and administration. I have continued to maintain relationships with so many good people who have provided help and counsel through the years. Some years ago, I sat where you are, today's graduates. I had a newly minted degree in forestry. The speaker at the commencement was Mr. Soichiro Honda. He gave his talk in Japanese through an interpreter. I, like you, said, "What's that guy saying?" So shortly at the end of his speech, his wife came out, dressed in a Japanese traditional kimono. And they pulled a lucky number out of a hat for a graduate. They gave away a 350cc motorcycle. Everybody stood up and applauded. It was the best speech I ever heard. Sorry, I have no motorcycle. No kimonos, right? I don't look good in one anyways. But I thought I'd give you something hopefully of value. Not advice, but just some thoughts on how I got from where you are today, where I am now, and some of the lessons I've learned along the way. Many years after my graduation from Michigan Tech, I find myself in a different place than where I started. Those of you that you think you know the future, good luck. Good luck. To be honest, I find myself in a different place than I ever expected it to be. I actually came out of college with plans to do what everybody with a forestry degree does. Be a smoke jumper in Alaska, set up a guide service in northern Wisconsin, and go to grad school. It didn't set well with my parents. So I applied for a job with the State Department of Agriculture, and the state job won out. And I ended up working there for many years. I started as field staff, and we were killing cattle for polybrominated biphenyls. I ended up being a chief deputy director, and we ended up killing cattle for tuberculosis. Didn't make much progress. But what I did do is, when I was chief deputy, I was able to work on a multitude of programs that let me do administration and policy and budgets. And I worked on food safety issues. And food safety issues are bipartisan, nonpartisan in nature, very complex, very scientifically grounded. But it did take a group problem-solving skills to solve those problems. And it helped me develop a wide network of relationships that served me well. So I've also had the honor of serving, as Glenn said, as the Director of Agriculture, of DNR. I spent about 9 months as DEQ Director, and now I'm back as DNR Director. I also work for private industry, for a food safety company. And the experience in the private sector really gave me appreciation for what the people in the public sector do and the direct impact that they have on people's lives. It increased my sense of urgency and actually was more responsive to those we serve. I never expected and probably couldn't have envisioned that I would become the director of 3 state departments and serve in the governor's cabinet. Never entered my mind. Part of the reason I was able to assume these roles, I'd like to think, was hard work, commitment, and finding ways to partner with other people, to find solutions and achieve success. And of course, that was based on a solid foundation that I received here at Michigan Tech. Critical element of entering these new roles has been remaining open to opportunities that came my way. Another was the person I met, the people I met along that influenced my life and my career. These people acted as mentors to me in various ways. I would encourage each of you to find a mentor that's been through real life experiences, both success and failure. One person that influenced me I met early in my work when I was at the Michigan Department of Ag. I was a young person doing pesticide work. And I was given a speech to a group of growers, farmers. And this fellow got up and he challenged me with a very pointed question. I was just out of college. I thought, no, I knew. I was right on the facts. So I responded pointedly. In fact, I was more than pointed. I was a little harsh. Put it bluntly, I handed him his head in a public setting. So this fellow came up to me afterwards. I thought, ooh, round 2. And he came up and he put his arm around me. And he said, young fella, he says, I think you're going to go far. But let me pass on something that my grandpappy passed on to me when I left the farm in Missouri. And I said, yes, sir, what was that? He said, remember, you can never have too many friends in life. And he and I became good friends. And the lesson was pretty simple. He was telling me not to forget about people and their dignity. He was telling me to exhibit a little humility in my own understanding of the facts. He was telling me to be respectful, even in disagreement. Now, you may have noticed, as I did during the country's recent election and its aftermath, our national political discussion has often become coarse and disrespectful. Too frequently, we are focused on what divides us rather than what unites us. It raises the question, what has happened to civility in our society? How do we disagree with mutual respect? I'm not sure I know the answer. It's a complex question. Maybe it's the proliferation and explosion of social media or media in general that made us so much more contentious. Maybe it's the reality that today, whether you're on Facebook or watching cable television, you can always find someone who reinforces your opinions and your biases. You can manage to avoid altogether those who challenge the way you think. Maybe we just lowered our own expectations. In any case, I think it's getting worse. The voices of division are getting louder, and they're drowning out the voices of unity. It is becoming more difficult for us to talk to each other. We seem to shout a bit more and listen a lot less. Yet if we stop shouting and start listening, I think we all might be surprised at what we can learn from people who don't share opinions. If we listened a little bit more, really listened, we might find out that we agree more than we disagree. I vitally believe that it's important to maintain a healthy intellectual curiosity. Not question other people's assumptions, but your own as well. Your time at Tech has taught you to develop your hypothesis, test your assumptions, seek out the facts and solutions, and look beyond the headlines. Where there are fundamental differences in our values, as is sometimes the case, maybe we can learn to disagree while remaining kind and decent to each other, and still seeking common cause on common ground. It's been my experience, too often we start at the edges, and we agree on the middle. My challenge is to start in the middle and then smooth the edges. One of my first mentors was a fellow named Dr. Gordon Geyer. He was a man who embodied civility and partnerships. He was a man that's comfortable having a beer in a bear camp or eating dinner with the president. He did both. Besides serving as president of Michigan State University, Gordon also was the director of agriculture and DNR, 2 jobs I've been lucky enough to hold. He died in March of this year at 89. He was the youngest old person I ever knew. Maybe that's because every stage of his life, he surrounded himself with youth. And it wasn't for what he could do for youth, but it's what youth could do for him. Remaining open to interaction with people of all ages and to their ideas can make a real difference in your lives. It can keep your lives vibrant and interesting, and it can form cross-generational bonds that are invaluable to expanding your horizons. It's important at this stage of your life to interact with those on the other end of the age spectrum. Learning goes both ways. Even as you listen to people from other generations, you can and will have a positive impact on their lives. The same is true with people that are different than you are. People who look different. People who hail from different cultures and countries than your own. People who think differently. Well, at the Department of Ag, I actually ran the pesticide program for the state of Michigan. And one thing we were having challenges with was pesticide exposures for migrant workers. They actually put migrant camps in the middle of orchards, and when they applied pesticides to the orchards, it blew into migrant housing. But if you complained as a worker, you were fired. Guess what? There's only so much as a person with my background and experience can do. We all have our limitations. We all have our blind spots. We all have our dead zones, so to speak. So what did I do? I actually reached out for help. In my career, when you reach out for help, that's a sign of strength, not weakness. And so I actually had a fellow in my organization. His name was Antonio Castro Escobar. He knew more than I did about migrants. He lived it. Came from Mexico, went to Michigan State University, got a graduate, undergraduate degree, and he helped me immensely. So we were able to set up anonymous pesticide reporting systems, things I couldn't do on my own. And that was just reaching across and saying, I need some help. And I really encourage you to do that. You know, it's important in any profession to be confident in what you know. It's just as important to know what you don't know, and then to seek help from when you recognize those blind spots. It's a human element that's too often forgotten or dismissed by those of us who rightly emphasize the importance of sound science. Whatever equation you're trying to solve, consider relationships and the human element to be an indispensable component to that equation, a factor that you have to take into account to be successful. You can be right and still go wrong. You can be right on the facts, right on the science, justified in your conclusions, and yet you cannot neglect the relationships that are essential to getting important work done. When I came to DNR, I had a solid background. It wasn't any of that. It was the relationships. And it was the richness of those relationships that allowed me to succeed and to look at some old issues and change the conversations around those issues and reframe the question. But even as we work around world-class natural resources, and I could brag about those a bit, the thing that DNR is doing right now is we're reaching out to urban centers, and we're trying to make a difference in urban settings. And so a while back we were able to have the privilege of managing Belle Isle as a state park. And some would say, why'd you do that? What's the DNR doing in Detroit? It really had to do with a bankruptcy. It had to do with tangible, visible improvement. It had to do with keeping young adults in the city, young adults in the state, and reframing that question and helping the city of Detroit. So I've been really fortunate to be able to do that. And who would have thought that the state's Natural Resource Agency would have been fundamental to that? And so I'll be real brief here. My last opportunity I had was to be DEQ director during the Flint water crisis. And during that time, it put everything I learned here and throughout my career to a test. It was interesting, challenging. It tested everything: my commitment to civility, the importance of relationships, the need to listen, the need to have a plan. I had the opportunity to go before Congress. Fascinating. Every Republican blamed the Democrats, and every Democrat blamed the Republicans, depending if you were Washington or the state. Total lack of civility, nothing actually relative to problem solving. We need to change that. It made great TV, but it really didn't help the people of Flint. And so what happened was we changed the conversation. We found out we're really guests in Flint. You should, Christina said it well, have the right to turn on the tap, drink the water. Right? You should not have to worry about that. You should not have to worry about your kids and grandkids. And if you had lead levels high enough in your drinking water, that it ended up having some developmental toxin. And so we actually then backed up a step, embraced our advocates, generated consistent data, and at this point in time, water quality is improving. It's a start. It's not a finish. We still have significant infrastructure work to do, and it will be a collaborative and collegial project as we move ahead. So I do encourage you all to recognize, as you have your career plans, to embrace those interruptions. You all have something to contribute to your community, your country, and your world. You and your fellow graduates have been given a first-class education, one that positions you well for success. I would urge you to stay connected to your fellow graduates in this institution's alumni organizations. And finally, what I normally tell my employees is work hard at hard work. Work hard at hard work. Do something worthwhile and enjoy the journey. And if you do that, you each in your own way will leave a lasting legacy. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here, and thank you to my alma mater for asking me to speak today. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. We oftentimes talk about disruptive technologies and what the future might be. And I think it's good for all of us to remember, and especially those of you that will lead this great nation in the future, that one of the greatest disruptors might be to be civil and to be respectful of people. So we're pleased to recognize Keith as somebody who's been able to do that for his many accomplishments. He's been a champion for Michigan's forests, lakes, natural resources, known across the state as someone who brings people together, finds common ground, and finds solutions to challenging land use and water problems. His extensive experience was called upon nearly a year ago when he was asked by Governor Rick Snyder to serve as the interim director of the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality during the Flint water crisis. In one of the more challenging periods in our state's history, Keith's experience, leadership skills, and communication abilities were well utilized as he and his team worked with the city of Flint and other stakeholders, people of Flint, Flint citizens, so that they would have the clean water that they deserve. Keith has since returned to his role as director of Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and we're grateful for Keith's leadership and contributions as well as his support to Michigan Tech through the years. We salute him and award him an honorary doctorate of philosophy. Dr. Cray, would you want to say a few words?
You just got done listening to me. You don't want to listen to me again. Well, thanks to my good friend, Glenn. He's a great leader, great president, and he does a great job for the university. Next, I'd thank my mom and dad, who happen to be in the audience, for the foundation that they set. I thank my wife, who's in the audience, for her love and support. And I thank my kids for their patience. So I'm humbled and honored to receive this award, and thank you very much.
you want to hear more about the story, you can go to, if you're a Tech alum, you've got an alumnus magazine. And if you're not, you can go online and you can see a full-blown story of how this has worked out.